Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking a highly detailed and frankly staggering piece of writing by Luis B. Vega. It's titled Moon Monuments, Lunar Anomalies. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract and examine Vega's claims regarding these alleged NASA cover-ups. We're talking about ancient extraterrestrial structures on the lunar surface.
Ranging from mining fortresses to massive city grids and, of course, impossible pyramids.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if an ancient civilization or an extraterrestrial force wanted to hide something of that immense scale from humanity, they would need the perfect blind spot. Vega's entire premise leans hard on the physics of the moon itself to provide that.
He establishes that physical reality immediately. It relies heavily on tidal locking.
Right, the mechanics of its orbit.
Yeah, because the moon's rotational period perfectly matches its orbit around Earth. That far side, what people colloquially call the dark side, well, it never actually faces us.
It's just permanently turned away.
Geographically speaking, if you are an extraterrestrial presence looking to establish a monitoring outpost, it is the absolute ultimate strategic location.
Because you can see us, but we can't see you.
You are close enough to observe Earth in real time, but you are naturally shielded from the prying eyes of early terrestrial optics.
It's nature's ultimate one-way mirror. Vega goes straight from that physical blind spot to the people who claim they've actually been looking behind, specifically focusing on a man named Dr. Eric Norton.
You have a government staffer who supposedly spent a decade working on a highly compartmentalized project, specifically tasked with monitoring what he explicitly referred to as alien moon bases. Norton supposedly risked his personal safety to come forward with these claims.
But what fascinates me isn't just the sheer scale of those 21-mile-high towers Norton described.
It's a geology.
It's how Vega anchors his argument on the physical geology of the moon. He asks us to look at the lunar surface through a completely different lens.
Because we are taught that the moon is just heavily pockmarked from billions of years of random asteroid bombardment.
Right, a cosmic shooting gallery, basically. Vega flips that entirely. He asks us to look at those massive craters, like an ancient, tapped-out open-pit mine.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it dramatically changes the visual context of the landscape. You start seeing straight lines.
Straight lines on a dead moon.
That simply defy natural geological formation.
Geology doesn't build right angle, which sounds exactly like the infrastructure you'd need for large-scale resource extraction. It literally paints a picture of an industrial wasteland.
Like an exhausted quarry.
If an ancient spacefaring civilization needed rare earth elements to build sprawling dome structures, they'd go to the closest lifeless rock. Or maybe they needed to extract helium-3 to fuel antimatter propulsion systems. They would strip mine the moon.
And Vega ties this directly into ancient astronaut theories. He specifically pulls from the work of Zecharia Sitchin. Sitchin argued that extraterrestrials visited our solar system primarily as resource extractors.
They could be the remnants of intense planet-scale mining.
Or, perhaps, the scars of whatever sudden, cataclysmic event abruptly halted that operation and forced them to abandon the equipment.
A tapped-out cosmic quarry. But here's the thing. If you have an exhausted mining pit and these towering extraction facilities, they had to leave something tangible behind.
Which brings Vega to the controversial satellite imagery. The most prominent piece of photographic evidence he presents is what lunar researchers refer to as the Hubble Pyramid.
Right, the pyramid in the crater.
This centers around an image of a near-perfect three-dimensional pyramid nestled right inside a lunar crater.
The Hubble Space Telescope was officially aimed at the moon back in 1999 to gather data.
But the public didn't see the photo then.
Nope. This specific anomalous image of the pyramid didn't magically leak onto the internet until 2008. And crucially, you will not find it anywhere in NASA's official public archives.
It exists entirely outside the sanctioned record, leaving researchers with a stark binary choice, at least according to Vega. It is either an incredibly elaborate digital fabrication, or it is a genuine, leaked photograph of an impossible structure that somehow slipped through the cracks.
But Vega knows a leaked photo on the internet is easily dismissed. So he doesn't just rely on the Hubble image.
No, he goes straight to the raw, publicly available data from the Apollo 17 mission.
The final manned mission in 1972. The last time human boots were supposedly on the regolith.
Vega singles out one specific cataloged frame taken by the astronauts. It's frame AS-17-135-2680HR.
And what does that frame look like initially?
Well, if you pull up the original raw negative of this image, it looks like a total mistake. It is severely washed out,
Just a blank white glare.
completely overexposed glare. But Vega explains that modern digital enhancement tools tell a very different story.
Let me stop you there, because I want to make sure we understand the mechanics of this.
Hmm.
How exactly does someone pull a secret ancient pyramid out of a blank white photograph from the 1970s? Are we talking about researchers just digitally drawing shapes into the static noise?
Not at all. It's really about data recovery. Even when analog film is massively overexposed by the harsh glare of the sun, the microscopic silver halide crystals on the film still capture varying levels of light intensity.
So the data is actually still embedded in the film.
Yes, the data is there. It's just compressed into the extreme bright end of the visual spectrum, which makes it totally invisible to the naked eye. So when modern researchers take that high-resolution raw scan into software like Photoshop, they aggressively adjust the gamma levels. They pull down the exposure and dramatically push the contrast.
They aren't adding any new pixel data at all.
They are simply separating the microscopic differences in light that the film originally captured. And when they process this specific Apollo 17 frame, a distinct, towering, pyramid-like structure emerges perfectly out of the background glare.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. So couldn't aggressively cranking the contrast on a 50-year-old sun-bleached piece of film just create chemical artifacts that happen to look like a pyramid? Or maybe the astronauts just caught a weird internal reflection in the camera lens.
Vega absolutely acknowledges that skepticism. But his counterargument to the lens flare or the pareidolia theory focuses heavily on the shadows. The most compelling evidence for these structures isn't just the lighted face of the object, which could arguably be a chemical artifact. It's the physical shadow that the object casts across the lunar regolith.
Ah, because a lens flare inside a camera doesn't cast a physical shadow on the ground outside.
And the geometry of these shadows is what defies a natural geological explanation. We are talking about massive shadows portraying near-perfect obelisk shapes.
Or triangles.
Right, flawless, symmetrical triangles stretching across the crater floors. A trick of the light doesn't anchor itself to the topography of the moon with undeniable physical volume.
The angles are simply too sharp.
Way too sharp and too mathematically perfect to be accidental piles of dust and meteor debris.
So the shadow is what grounds the object in physical reality. But Vega takes this theory way beyond just one anomalous pyramid caught on Apollo film. He scales it up to a level that is almost incomprehensible. He moves from isolated structures to pointing out massive, highly organized city grids just hidden right out in the open on modern mapping applications.
He dives really deep into the digital architecture of Google Moon. Now, Google Moon relies on a massive photographic strip. It's a visual patchwork spanning roughly 2,520 kilometers across the lunar surface.
And the craziest part Vega highlights is how much of this public mapping tool relies on legacy imagery from the 1960s.
Which is strange when you think about it.
It is. We've been sending orbiters, probes, and rovers up there for decades. We have mapping satellites in orbit right now. But the public-facing map is this stitched-together Frankenstein of incredibly old, grainy photos.
And within the seams of that patchwork, Vega claims to find deliberate, massive obfuscation. He directs our attention to the extreme edges of these photographic strips. He argues these aren't just missing data packets or low-resolution rendering errors. He says they are intentional digital redactions hiding sprawling, geometric, white rectangular complexes underneath.
Exactly like reading a heavily redacted classified document, where an intelligence officer just takes a thick black Sharpie to a page. You see the margins, you know the text is flowing underneath the ink, but the core information is aggressively censored.
Vega even provides the specific lunar locations for these alleged redacted zones. He maps out vast grids located near the Euler crater, Rima Draper, Rima 1, and complexes adjacent to the Sea of Serenity.
Vast grids. How big are we talking?
According to his analysis of the scale, some of these rectangular complexes average over 1.5 miles in length.
Wow.
We're talking about artificial infrastructure the size of Lower Manhattan, just blurred into digital oblivion.
1.5 miles of alien city grid. But wait, this brings up a massive, glaring logistical problem for the cover-up theory.
The telescope issue.
Yes. If there are glowing white geometric cities sitting on the moon, stuff we don't need a tidally locked blind spot to hide, why do we need a leaked Google Moon image to see them?
That's a very fair question.
Why hasn't some amateur astronomer with a high-end telescope in their backyard just taken a crystal clear photo of these rectangular buildings and posted it online?
Vega actually anticipated that exact friction point. He explains that while civilian optics have improved dramatically, the true observatory-class telescopes, the ones on Earth actually capable of resolving a mile-wide object into clear architectural detail at that immense distance, well, they're fundamentally institutional.
They're controlled by the state.
Heavily funded by, operated by, and reporting directly to intelligence and space agencies. The general public simply does not get raw, unfiltered access to those massive focal lengths.
So they control the flow of data.
By maintaining an absolute monopoly on the highest tier optical data, these agencies can easily control the public narrative. The amateur astronomer with a backyard telescope might just see a bright, unresolvable blur.
But the institutional observatory sees a building.
Right, but only the blurry image is allowed into the public domain.
It's an information bottleneck. Now, if you have these massive mile-and-a-half-long city grids, and you have these exhausted mining craters, they can't just exist in isolation.
You have to connect them.
Right, you don't build a massive industrial complex without connecting the dots.
Which brings Vega to the infrastructure. He highlights a specific, highly unusual anomaly located between the Sea of Serenity and the Oceanus Imbrium.
And that location is important, right?
Very. It's notably about 50 miles away from where the Apollo 15 crew conducted their surface surveys. He claims satellite imagery reveals an 18-kilometer-long pathway, functioning either as a transit road or a massive conveyor belt connecting different zones.
That's 10 miles of highway on the moon. And before anyone shouts at their speakers, oh, it's just the tracks left by the lunar rovers, Vega shoots that down beautifully. He compares this specific anomaly to the Nazca Lines in Peru.
It's a very apt comparison. The defining hallmark of the Nazca Lines is their unyielding mathematical straightness over rough topography. Vega points out this lunar structure cuts a perfectly direct line for those entire 18 kilometers. A human driving a rover, or even a remote operator navigating Soviet probes from Earth, constantly weaves.
They dodge boulders.
They navigate around smaller craters. They follow the path of least resistance.
Rover tracks look like someone driving a dune buggy on a rocky beach. They meander. But this is an engineered mathematical straight line.
It cuts through the terrain and then dissipates after 18 kilometers, leaving the open question of whether it was designed for rapid transit between those city grids.
Or specifically for transporting extracted materials from those cosmic quarries we discussed earlier. So what does this all mean? Let's take a massive step back here and look at the whole board. We've got whistleblowers tracking 21-mile towers. We've got gamma-recovered Apollo data showing geometric pyramids.
The Sharpie blackouts on Google Moon.
MS Paint-style blackouts over lunar cities, and a 10-mile alien highway. The sheer coordination required to hide this across over 100 public lunar missions spanning decades, crossing intense geopolitical rivalries like the Cold War. Why? What could possibly justify the motive for this unprecedented level of planetary secrecy?
What's fascinating here is that Vega doesn't just point to standard military paranoia or a desire to reverse engineer alien weapons. He dives deep into the philosophical and sociological threat this discovery would pose.
It's an existential threat.
Vega argues that revealing ancient lunar civilizations would completely dismantle the foundational paradigms of modern human society, starting with the Darwinian evolutionary model.
Because finding a 10-mile engineered highway on a dead moon proves that highly advanced biological life existed, engineered, and built megastructures long before humanity ever harnessed fire.
It scrambles our entire biological timeline.
It completely throws the scientific consensus into absolute chaos.
But Vega goes further, exploring how it would profoundly challenge the bedrock of world religions. He specifically invokes a theological framework known as the gap theory.
The gap theory essentially looks at the space between Genesis 1.1 and 1.2 in the biblical text.
Yes, certain interpretations of the Hebrew text suggest there is a massive chronological gap between the initial creation of the heavens and the earth and the subsequent ordering of the world for humanity.
A huge gap in time.
Vega points out that this theory allows for an entire prior age, complete with civilizations, conflicts, and life on places like the Moon and Mars, long before human history began. If we suddenly find ancient monuments on the Moon, it validates this prior age, while simultaneously forcing religious institutions to completely rewrite their teachings on humanity's unique central place in the universe.
So these major pillars of society, the scientific establishment and the major religious institutions, derive their absolute power and influence from being the ultimate authorities on human origins. If an intelligence agency rolls out an undeniable photo of an alien pyramid on the moon tomorrow, That authority evaporates overnight.
Vega frames the cover-up as an act of pure institutional survival. He asserts that these entities have a deeply vested interest in maintaining the status quo. He actually uses the term sheeple to describe a public kept deliberately in a trance.
Just blindly following along.
By controlling the data from our own solar system, these institutions maintain control over the human narrative. They might use the fear of mass panic or global hysteria as the internal excuse for classifying the photos, but the true motive is holding on to sociological power.
It's about protecting the paradigm at all costs.
Which brings me to a highly provocative, rhetorical question Vega drops near the very end of his text. He asks, did NASA truly not anticipate that one day, everyday people with a laptop would be able to zoom in on the lunar surface, just like we zoom in on a digital street view?
That's a great point.
The sheer volume of these alleged objects seems impossible for any single agency to continuously redact as technology democratizes.
And that is the perfect thought to leave you with today. Building on Vega's point, look at the era we are actively entering right now. The state monopoly on optics is crumbling.
It really is.
Private, civilian spaceflight is rapidly becoming a reality. Advanced amateur telescopes now utilize AI image stacking that absolutely rivals the multi-million-dollar observatory tech from just a few decades ago.
The technical barrier between a private citizen and the stars is practically gone.
The information bottleneck is breaking. How long can any single government act as the gatekeeper of the cosmos?
Until then, keep questioning what you see.
Thanks for diving deep with us.